Blessings, everyone. This is Reverend Aphren with the Four Pillars Temple. I'm coming to you from kind of sunny, kind of overcast northeastern Ohio. We're looking at storms in the forecast. So I'm coming to you as a follow-up to the last video that we did. Excuse me. In my last video, we talked a little bit about what it means to be a spiritual person and the quality of our spiritual practice, right? And I mentioned a couple of things in that video. One of the things that I talked about was how in the Four Pillars Temple we place a lot of focus and emphasis on devotion, right? The importance of how do we practice that, what does that look like, what does that mean, right? But I think it might be important to take just a step back and talk a little bit about spirituality in general. And the audience that I'm speaking to, mostly Correllians, mostly Wiccans, mostly pagans, right? So for us, we have a different understanding of spirituality than maybe other religions do, right? Especially the majority religion in this country, which is Christianity, right? And so for us, when we talk about spirituality, what we're really referring to is we're not referring to religion, right? We're not talking about a set of principles and beliefs that you have to follow and adhere to in order to belong to this said group of people, right? That would be religion. Spirituality is different. A lot of people will say, well, you know, I'm not religious, I'm more spiritual. And I think what they mean to say is, I don't follow mainstream religion, or I don't follow, or I don't agree with the status quo, right? And so what I want to talk about is, you know, exactly what spirituality is. And so essentially spirituality is basically having a relationship with something bigger than yourself, right? Spirituality can look different for a lot of different people. When we talk about things like Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, right? People that are in recovery, that are in the process of their recovery, involved in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, right? There are spiritual principles to those programs that have nothing to do with God, right? So when we talk about spirituality, we don't always necessarily mean God. When we talk about spirituality, we don't always necessarily mean even having a religion or having a faith, right? So some of the spiritual principles that are talked about are things like honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, surrender, courage, you know, things of perseverance, right? Things of that nature. That's not necessarily related to God, right? Those are personal attributes that we have that help us to engender a spiritual life or a spiritual practice. Things like gratitude. Gratitude is so important. That's why, you know, you see a lot people are, you know, encouraging others to do a gratitude journal or to keep a list of things that they're grateful for. When we use gratitude, we're thinking in a completely different mindset, right? And whoever that is that we might be grateful to, right? Maybe that is our higher power, our God, our goddess, right? Or spirit, as some people just refer to it generally. We have gratitude, and gratitude puts us in a place of peace and acceptance. You know, I know that things aren't as good as they could be, but at least I have gratitude for what I have today. And that is so important. And those are kind of the spiritual principles that any one of us can work to evoke inside of ourselves that has nothing to do with the gods, has nothing to do with anything like that, right? And so this is all stuff that I think really comes into my purview as a high priest when I work with individuals that maybe don't know what their faith is, or maybe don't know if Wicca is for them, or maybe don't know if Correllianism is for them, or maybe they, you know, get involved in the Correllian tradition and they're not so sure where they fit in or where, you know, it matters the most. So now that we have an understanding of what spirituality is, I want to talk a little bit about what being spiritual gets you, right? A lot of people identify as atheist. A lot of people don't want to be religious. I think there's a movement right now in the magical community where people don't really want to be religious. I want to be a witch, I want to be a wizard, I want to be a magical person, and I don't really want to believe in a god or have a relationship with a god, right? Or goddess, right? Maybe I'm very pragmatic in my approach of magic. Well, you know, everyone knows that Zeus is good for civics and order, and you know, Athena is good for home crafts and warcraft and loom weaving, right? Being very basic, obviously. You know, and maybe there are people out there, magical people, that think of their gods like tools. I'm going to just put this tool in this place and I'm going to use it for this purpose, right? I think the majority of us aren't like that. I think the majority of us, especially my audience that I'm talking to, really truly want to be spiritual and really truly want to belong to something greater than themselves, and really truly want to practice service, and really truly want to be part of the faith and have faith, right? And so there's a really great article that came out a couple of years ago in Psychology Today, and it talked about some of the positive things, the benefits that a person can have when they become spiritual. And so when we look at this article, it's actually really interesting. You know, they talk about how people that are spiritual more or less are very compassionate, right? Whether we believe in God or whether we don't believe in God, we obviously believe that there is a spiritual connection between us and all people. And as Correllians, we absolutely believe that, right? We know that within each of us is a divine spark, and that divine spark is what helps us to stay connected. And so when we honor that spark, we cultivate compassion, right? Compassion is a large part of my spirituality, right? For those of you who maybe don't follow me often or haven't really seen a lot of things I post in the temple, you might not know that my patron deity, if I could call her that, is Guan Yin, Bodhisattva of compassion, the goddess of mercy, right? When I pray to her, I'm asking her for guidance, I'm asking her for mercy, right? And for compassion. Compassion is so important, so important. We also know that people who are spiritual can give themselves more time. You know, we care, kind of like what I mentioned in my last video, we care more about the quality than the quantity. You know, the quantity doesn't matter, because I know that my life will end eventually, and when it ends, I'm going to not be in this physical incarnation anymore. And so I can't take all this stuff with me. So what I care more about is the experiences. What I care more about is being with other people and having meaningful experiences, right? We also know that, you know, if we follow with the Correllian idea and we look at the Vangelo della Strega, we know that the goddess, we are the goddess incarnate. We are the spiritual essence that has been made flesh, that is incarnated in the physical body. To what? To experience the world, right? So that we can return to the goddess after our life, and we can share and we can integrate those experiences of our life with the goddess. That's important, right? And so if we want to be spiritual, and we are spiritual people, we want to have those relationships, have those experiences, and that's more important to us. Spiritual people also are gracious. The word they use is gracious, right? So we talked about gratitude just a minute ago, and we talked about the importance of gratitude, how having that grateful mindset really puts us in a positive place. Because when you have gratitude and you say, like I mentioned a moment ago, things could be bad, things could be worse, things could be so much worse than they are right now. But instead of focusing on that, I'm focusing on what I do have and being grateful for what I do have. That changes the game all the way around. All the way around. We look at people differently. People are not just what they can do for me, but what we can do together, or what I can do for them, and the service that I can provide for them, and being grateful for someone's company, being grateful for someone's help, being grateful for what we have, right? Because at the end of the day, we all know that you that we all have this insatiable desire and this insatiable urge to want to get more, to have more, to be more. That's something that's ingrained in us, in our society, in our culture, in American Western culture, and consumer culture. That is deeply ingrained in us. And so what we do is if we can practice gratitude, we no longer feel like there's this hole inside of me that I need to fill. We now feel like I don't have a hole inside of me. I'm okay just the way that I am. And that changes the entire game. We also know, at least from this article, they talk about how spiritual people often, they say flourish, right? They use the word flourish. We grow because we have this internal motivation to grow and to not just grow like financially or grow professionally, but grow spiritually, right? We want to be better. We want to see better. We identify that there are things within us that we'd like to change, and we work toward changing those things, right? Because we've gained that awareness through our spiritual practice. And then one of the last things that this article mentions is that spiritual people self-actualize, right? And so you may have heard that term before, maybe you haven't. When we talk about self-actualization, some people may call it moksha. Some people may call it nirvana. Some people may call it satori, right? It's this place where we come to not only acceptance of ourself, acceptance of our environment, we're able to see the connection of all beings, the interrelatedness of all beings. And we reach this period of enlightenment, right? A lot of psychologists have said that human nature, we have an innate, ingrained desire to self-actualize. We have an innate desire to want to be the best that we can be. And that's what spirituality can give to us. That's what spirituality affords us, is the opportunity to do that. So being spiritual, regardless of how we do it, whether it's through religion, through organized religion, whether it's through doing our own thing and being a solitary, whether it's a combination of the two, we have an opportunity to honor the spiritual side of our being, the spiritual side of our wellness, and come to a place of wellness. And one of the ways that I do this is through devotion, right? When we can take something outside of ourselves and we can devote ourselves to that ideal, to that cause, to that goal, we have this way in our minds to be able to create a space between us and that thing, create a distance between us and that thing, but also in some strange way accept the mantle of that thing as being us as well. And there's a really great saying in Buddhism, they say that the viewer of an object and the object being viewed in that moment become one, right? So the viewer and the viewee become one. And essentially that's what happens in spiritual practice, right? Let's say that I want to cultivate compassion, and so I find a deity that I honor and worship and become devoted to as a way to cultivate that compassion. And by doing that, I reflect it back on me and I accept it and I become it, right? And so there's this really interesting thing that happens when we practice spirituality in whatever way that is, right? And that could be true for anything that we're looking at. And so understanding that the object of our devotion is powerful and it has an effect on us, and the viewer and the viewee are one. And so choosing the appropriate and correct object of our devotion is really important. Also, simply choosing to be spiritual has a very strong impact on us. So I invite you to, think about that and how maybe you could utilize that in your own practice. And I call it a practice because it is. We have to try and fail and try and fail and try again until we find something. And some of us may find it the first time, some of us may not find it for a long time. But choosing to be spiritual and live a spiritual life doesn't, again, necessarily mean being religious or identifying as a religion, but being willing and open to explore some of these topics and practice something that's going to help you. And again, the way that I do that is through devotion, devoting myself to a cause, devoting yourself to something that's meaningful to you, learning what your values are and exploring them and applying those values to your life so that you can live a meaningful life and a life that's full of integrity. So I hope this short video helps someone. I'm really trying not to be long-winded. I hope you appreciate it. So thank you so much again for watching and giving your support. And until next time, signing off for now.